The Western Front was the most important and largest front of World War I. In the battles fought here, about 4 million men were killed, 15 million were wounded, and 1.5 million were taken prisoner. When World War I, known at the time as the Great War, began, the Germans launched the prepared Schlieffen-Moltke plan. The aim of this plan was to defeat France quickly and then turn to fight Russia, since Germany was surrounded by enemies on both the eastern and western sides. Rather than dividing their forces in two, the Germans intended to strike France first with the strongest part of their army, which was one of the most powerful and disciplined land forces in the world, while the Russians, who had poor infrastructure and a slow mobilization process, were still preparing for war. After defeating France, the Germans planned to defeat Russia easily together with the Austrians and the Ottomans. The Germans began implementing the plan, launching a rapid offensive toward Belgium and France with 6 or 7 armies. They quickly overran Belgian defenses and advanced forward. When Belgium was invaded, the British Empire entered the war. Some Belgians resisted fiercely, but the Germans suppressed them harshly, executing those they suspected, which caused widespread resentment against Germany. Meanwhile, the French attacked the Germans in the Lorraine region but were stopped by a German counteroffensive. The French and the British Expeditionary Force suffered heavy defeats in the initial battles and were forced to retreat all the way to the Marne River. However, because the Russians mobilized faster than expected, some German troops had to be transferred to the Eastern Front. Among the German forces, one army was moving faster than the others. The commander of the slower army, General Bülow, ordered the faster one, under General Kluck, to halt and wait. Kluck obeyed, but this pause gave the British and French forces time to regroup. They stopped their retreat, reinforced their lines, and launched a counterattack through the gap between Kluck's and Bülow's armies, breaking through the German lines. As a result, the German commander, Helmut von Moltke, ordered a retreat. The Germans fell back to the Aisne River and dug in there. French General Joffre ordered continued attacks against the Germans at the Aisne, but the Germans held their positions and repelled the assaults. This battle marked the beginning of trench warfare and the static front lines that would remain for years. After the failure of the Schlieffen-Moltke plan, Moltke was dismissed and replaced by Erich von Falkenhayn. Although the Germans had lost ground by September, they noticed that the French left flank near the coast was exposed. In October, the Germans attempted another offensive to outflank the Allies from the north, while the French and British tried the same maneuver in return. The series of battles that followed became known as the Race to the Sea, though the true objective was not to reach the sea itself, but to outflank the enemy. This was the situation as of October. The Germans had failed to conquer France, and the French had failed to achieve what they wanted, but they had managed to stop the Germans. The Western Front, which would remain unchanged despite heavy losses for 4 years, had been opened. On October 20, the Germans launched an attack from Bethune to the coast. In what became known as the Battle of Ypres, the British I Corps advance from Aisne stabilized the forces. The Germans suffered heavy losses and were stopped by the Allied forces. On October 31, the Germans attacked again, making good progress under heavy bombardment and capturing key areas. However, due to German losses and organizational problems, the Allied forces narrowly defeated the Germans. In these battles, both sides were severely weakened and suffered heavy losses. By the end of 1914, the war had become static, and trench warfare had begun. In 1915, the trenches were still of a rather simple construction. As neither side had been able to achieve a quick and decisive victory, the armies settled into defensive positions that would define the Western Front for years to come. During this period, Germany began experimenting with chemical weapons. The German army launched its first chlorine gas attack during the Second Battle of Ypres, targeting Allied troops. In response, the Allied powers took precautions and soon began to employ their own poison gases. The French army became the largest among the Allied forces, while the British Expeditionary Force was strengthened by fresh reinforcements. In reaction, The Germans fortified their positions as the Allies began to take the initiative. They dug deeper trenches to resist artillery bombardment and reinforced their defenses with machine guns and barbed wire. The French continued their offensives throughout the winter. General Joffre adopted what he called a strategy of nibbling away at the German defenses. From December 1914 to March 1915, French forces launched attacks in Artois and Champagne, aiming to strike the Noyon salient. In the First Battle of Artois, the French 10th Army attacked the northern side of the salient. In the First Battle of Champagne, the French 4th Army attacked from the south. Despite their efforts, the French suffered around 240,000 casualties and achieved little territorial gain. These battles demonstrated to both sides the devastating impact of artillery bombardment on the modern battlefield. Throughout the autumn, both sides attempted to break the deadlock on the front by launching small-scale attacks. However, they gained only a few hundred meters, at most 1 or 2 kilometers, and for these tiny patches of ground they suffered tens of thousands of casualties. Instead of breaking the stalemate, these attacks only worsened morale. By the end of summer, the Entente powers decided to act. Joffre's autumn offensive strategy was not aimed at achieving a major breakthrough on the front. Rather, it sought to force the Germans away from key positions, disrupt the continuity of their defensive line, and compel them to fall back. The French would attack again in Artois and Champagne, while the British would strike at Loos simultaneously. The Entente held numerical superiority and launched the offensive on the 25th of September. In Champagne, the French achieved notable gains in certain sectors. On the first day, they broke through the German defensive line and advanced 4 kilometers. On the second day they continued to move forward, though less than before, while their casualties increased dramatically. The battle soon reverted to a war of attrition. In Artois, the French were disappointed. The German defenses were extremely strong and stubbornly defended. Although the French seized some important positions, they suffered heavy losses and were halted. They attacked again from another direction, captured Souay, and assaulted Vimy Ridge with determination, but were driven back by the Germans. They tried repeatedly, but failed. The British attacked with a gas release followed by an infantry assault. With 6 divisions, they advanced on the German trenches. In some areas, the gas clouds blew back onto the British troops, disrupting the attack. The British gained a little ground but were eventually stopped. Thus 1915 came to an end. Despite their immense losses, neither side had achieved anything significant, and the front line had remained unchanged for an entire year. In December 1915, a Christmas proclamation written by the German Chief of the General Staff, Falkenhayn, was distributed to the army. The French are the sword of the British, and that sword must be broken. The Germans were preparing for a powerful attack on the Western Front. Their target was Verdun, a strategic strongpoint, never before lost by the French, and exceptionally well defended. The aim of the attack was to exhaust the French through attritional warfare, break their morale, and force them to seek peace. Falkenhayn entrusted the assault to Crown Prince Wilhelm's Fifth Army. On the 21st of February 1916, the Germans launched their offensive. For 9 hours, they subjected the French lines to an artillery bombardment, the heaviest since the war had begun. Afterwards, the Germans advanced carefully. The French resisted and fought desperately. They suffered extremely heavy losses. For 4 days, the Germans advanced with great precision and captured key strategic positions. They were inflicting devastating casualties on the French and pushing forward effectively. Verdun received supplies by a narrow railway. Had the Germans targeted it, they might have captured Verdun itself. However, their goal was not territorial gain but the destruction of the enemy army. Thanks to the measures taken by French commander Pétain, the Germans gradually began to lose momentum. They launched additional attacks on surrounding sectors around Verdun but failed to achieve success. In the following months, the Brusilov offensive and the British assault on the Somme, intended to ease the pressure on the French, helped relieve the situation. The French counterattacked and recaptured key strategic points. The Battle of Verdun ended in July. The total casualties reached 700,000, half German, half French. After this, Falkenhayn was dismissed and replaced by Hindenburg and Ludendorff. While the fighting at Verdun continued, the British launched the Battle of the Somme, partly to support the French and partly to break the deadlock on the front. The British encountered strong German defences and, under the fire of German machine guns, suffered extremely heavy losses. Although they made small gains in the north, they advanced more successfully in the south, where their artillery bombardment was more effective and German defences less formidable. There, they broke through the German lines. The Germans had improved their trenches and, reinforced with troops brought from Verdun, managed to halt the British advance. This concludes the first part of the Western Front. See you in the next section.